Welcome to Direct Approach, a bi-weekly podcast hosted by Wayne Moorhead, filled with timely insights, fresh perspectives, and actionable takeaways from your direct selling executive peers to help fuel the growth and evolution of your business. On today's episode, we welcome David Brown and Ryan Thompson, co-founders and co-CEOs of ACTIVZ. Launched in 2017, the Utah-based company defied convention and chose to focus exclusively on the Hispanic market by launching in Mexico. Omnichannel and multinational, ACTIVZ is growing rapidly. While formerly operating in Mexico, the United States, Peru, and Japan, the company's reach extends around the world through a program they call Global Connect that allows distributors to sell in over 220 countries and territories. In this episode, they share their international expansion strategies, personalized approaches, and tech tools that catapulted them onto an elite list of direct selling organizations with 4 consecutive years of revenue growth. Whether you're new to direct selling or a seasoned executive, this episode serves as an incredible startup case study, offering invaluable insights to elevate your global expansion strategies. But before we begin, this episode is sponsored by ACTIVZ. ACTIVZ was started by a team of experts that shared a single vision: to overturn the archaic, restrictive model of housing data and create an entirely new kind of platform from the ground up. From your first dollar to your billionth and beyond, ACTIVZ's platform scales in lockstep with your global growth, aspirations, and vision. With clients in 120 countries, supporting 40 currencies and 30 languages, plus over 200 open APIs and SDKs, they empower an existing tech team to control their own best-in-class solution vision. To connect and learn more, visit ACTIVZ.com. That is EXIGO.com. Now let's welcome your host, Wayne Moorhead, and our guests, co-founders and co-CEOs of ACTIVZ, David Brown and Ryan Thompson.
Hello and welcome to another episode of DSN's Direct Approach podcast. I am your host, Wayne Moorhead, and today I'm fortunate to be joined by 2 dynamic direct selling leaders. One began his career practicing international corporate law and then shifted into operating roles, both in the retail and direct selling channel. Another began his career in the direct selling channel at a large public company, also spent time on the distributor side, and both have had great success growing multiple companies. They're currently leading a company which recently landed on DSN's list of companies with at least 4 years of consecutive growth. Very cool accomplishment. I'm excited to welcome David Brown, co-CEO and co-founder of ACTIVZ, and Ryan Thompson, co-CEO and co-founder at ACTIVZ. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being here.
Great to be here. Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Wayne.
Yeah, as I mentioned before we started recording, David, this is such a great opportunity for me to chat with you. You're very well known, so well respected in the channel, have done some amazing things. So I've always heard the legend of David Brown, never had the opportunity to really sit down and chat with you. So I'm really looking forward to learning from you and gaining a lot of great insights. And Ryan, I'm going to date myself. Ryan and I go back to the college days. We knew each other, had a lot of mutual friends, worked at 1 or 2 companies together. Another individual I've had a ton of respect for a few decades now. I guess I will throw out the number and kind of age myself there. But you have both had such incredible and varied careers. Do you mind telling us a little bit about the path that led you into direct selling and to founding ACTIVZ? And David, can we start with you?
Sure. I got to go back to that legendary David Brown. David Brown is such a common name. You're probably talking about somebody else.
Well,
but
I guess it's possible, but I don't think so. Not a direct selling David Brown. So.
Well, it really has been quite an adventure and a circuitous route for me. As you mentioned, I am a lawyer by training. I try to get that out of the way so people won't immediately walk away and hold that against me. I'm what I call a recovering lawyer. I practiced international corporate law for some time. And the way I got into the supplement industry generally was by becoming general counsel to a, at that time, small nutritional supplement company out of Colorado that was selling into retail, primarily mom and pop health food stores. I later became their president, and we had great expansion into the food, drug, and mass channels, and grew that company called Natural Balance quite a bit, and then sold it, and it was acquired by a much larger company. And then I was recruited to San Diego to run a company some people have heard of called Metabolife, which was in direct selling. Unfortunately, they made a very drastic and terrible mistake in that they did some things to really turn off their distributors. And that happened prior to my arrival, but I learned the worst thing that ever happened to that company was leaving direct sales. I was asked to take them into retail, and while we had a tremendous success and we're the largest diet company in the world at the time, still, I think that in retrospect, they made a mistake by not doing right in many ways by their distributors. Fast forward, I joined a company called LifeVantage, and they were in retail. And we did just the opposite. They shouldn't have been in retail. And I thought it'd be great for them to go to direct selling and specifically network marketing. But unfortunately, I didn't know anything about that. And so my destiny, so to speak, my path forward, and much of what we later described as some real success, really turned upon meeting the other guy that's with us today with this great hairdo, is Ryan Thompson, and many of the team that he had. But for my very momentous meeting, frankly, my story would be very different. But we were able to come together, and he was coming off, and his team was coming off a very successful run of their own. And frankly, pretty much everything I know about network marketing, for better or for worse, I learned from Ryan Thompson, my partner, and he has been a great mentor and teacher to me in this specific space. And we, after having great success at that other company, we got together now, Ryan, 7 years ago, and said, in addition to the things that we've been able to accomplish together, there's some things we haven't done. And we'd like to create something new and different. And that led us to ACTIVZ, and we've been having a great time ever since.
Yeah. That's great. Thank you for that. I think it's fascinating, before we jump into Ryan, just that you've looked at products, you've looked at channels strategically, and have really worked to make sure that there's a great kind of product market fit, which I know also informed your approach for ACTIVZ. And so I found it really interesting that you're able to kind of pull something off the shelf and make sure it was in the right place, with the right people, with the right way to market and distribute. So super fascinating aspect of your really successful career. Ryan.
All right. Well, thanks, Wayne. Having this discussion with you specifically, I'm getting a little sidetracked because I'm thinking about the good old days. You and I got started at the same exact company back in the mid 90s. I worked at that time pretty closely with your brother Russ, and anyways, it's been a fun few decades, as you mentioned. That's my background. I double majored in psychology and Spanish, and got a job offer paying me a lot more than a teacher would back then, and when I graduated in the late 90s. And the rest is really history. I discovered later, a few months into that was a direct selling company. I didn't even understand what that was when I started working at that company, Nu Skin. It's okay to say that. A great company, learned a lot there, and was there for 7 years. And at the end of that, felt like I knew everything about the industry. No, I really did want to get off the bench and get in the game. I had a furniture company at the time that I was running with a few friends, but I also signed up as a distributor in the industry of a company, and then another company, and then a third company. Kept learning and failing, kind of falling forward. Really loved the industry. I loved what I had learned about distributors, that, an entrepreneur without a lot of overhead or capital could realistically invest in themselves and fare very, very well. And both you and I, worked with some top earners at that company. And that was, that was a great opportunity. So I wanted to try it out myself. My third try, the technology company called ACN, I actually was able to live off of what I made there. And that was great. I think, to make a long story a little bit shorter, I learned the hard way about a disruptive technology. A lot of times in the industry, it's kind of cliche to talk about disruptive technologies. Well, I had thousands of customers at that company and hundreds of distributors, and almost overnight lost all of them when the smartphones came out and started to bundle local with long distance. I don't know if you remember that. And overnight, no one paid long distance, and all of my income was based on long distance customers. So I had to, quickly come crawling back to the corporate side of the industry. And I was lucky enough to get a job at Marinda T. Shannoni, and got to really dive into competitive intelligence at the time. My passion was working with people, so I left doing CI after about a year and worked in Latin America. Really fell in love with Latin America. Loved working with people, with the distributors down there, Mexico, Colombia, Peru, Ecuador at the time, Venezuela. Also, Brazil was one of our markets. Chile was a market that I'd lived in for a few years. And anyways, left that company, had an opportunity to do a startup, then to do another startup with some really good friends. That company was Zri. We had a product that Deepak Chopra and his colleagues had developed. And that was exciting, right? You and I kept in close contact during those years, Wayne. I think you were at Monavie at the time. And it was neat because I had gone from sort of large cap to small startup and small cap, in just overnight. And I loved that. It was exhilarating. And about 2 years later is when I met David. And, we had sort of an exodus from that company, the management team, the co-founders. We retained some of our top distributors who, were old friends of ours from previous companies, still are really good friends. I have a lot of respect for them. And met David and met the scientists, members of the board. They had a great product, great story. They wanted a new channel, so direct selling. We launched them, as David said. David, my story, as you just noticed, kind of do this, and then we're now on the we now share the same story. That was a fun run. I was there for 7 years. Left. David and I were both doing independent ventures, consulting, and working in some other activities. And beginning of 2016, I started to get contacted from people who wanted to invest in a company. They had kind of seen what we had done at the previous company, LifeVantage. Can't just say the name. Great company, great people over there. And I started to take these visits, these meetings down in Mexico, and determined, what, if I'm going to do this again, and I really had no desire to do it. I had kind of lost my appetite for a variety of reasons of wanting to start another company. It's exhausting to start and to grow a company, and then to do it again, and then to do it again. But I started to talk with some old friends, David Brown being one of them, and some of the scientists being others of them, and just some other strategic partners, and said, okay, if we're going to do this, we're going to do it right. We're going to go big. So we wanted the best scientists, the best science, the best management members, and they, really for us, they're old friends. They are all of our management team. They are people with whom we've worked, not at one other company, but I think in every case, at least 3 companies. In some cases, I've been with some of our management team. This is our 6th company together where we have worked at these mid-cap and startups, and we really trust each other. We feel a lot like an old, I'm going to say soccer, not basketball. Sorry, soccer's my sport. An old soccer team that we've just played together. So that's part of why we're having success. We trust each other. We allow for each other to make mistakes, and we support each other. And that's a little bit of my background, and kind of brings us to the present. David and I, got together, as he mentioned, about 7 years ago, and launched ACTIVZ. And it's been up and down, but mostly up. And that's why we're talking today, I think.
Yeah, thank you so much for the backgrounds. Again, both incredible and varied. You've been part of multiple successful growth companies. And I love that you kind of have found this team, this tribe that you all continue to work with. That's one of the things I love about direct selling is, not just the incredible field people that we end up meeting with, and a lot of times have these lifelong relationships and connections with, but so many people on the corporate side, we do end up, working together multiple times when you kind of find that group that you just really connect with and are in sync with. And I love that you guys were able to connect again and help create and grow another amazing company. And at the beginning, one of the things I think that's so interesting about the ACTIVZ story is you made the very strategic decision to not launch initially in the US like many companies do, and then build a base and then extend from there. But you made the decision to make Mexico your primary market and to go directly kind of start out international. Can you share a little bit about that decision making and what were some of the key drivers to that approach?
David?
Well, actually, I'm going to defer to Ryan first because it was a lot based upon experience and second language capability, not mine, his. And he had a lot of contacts and had done a lot of things in Mexico and Latin America. And on that note, Ryan, take it away.
Okay. Well, yeah, it makes me think about, Wayne, the first meeting I had with David. Actually, we had multiple meetings over the course of a year, but really when we came together, I don't think that David was surprised. I think it was, it was like, okay, yeah, let's go to Mexico. And it really is not very complicated, and it's not as interesting a story as maybe I wish it were. It has to do, I mean, this industry we know is based on relationships, period. You can have the greatest product, you can have, huge investment, you can have a beautiful corporate office, you can have a lot of bells and whistles, but if you don't have real relationships with people who are field leaders, distributors, networkers, who know what they're doing, who have, who are professionals at doing that, then you don't have anything. Right? There are companies that spin in and out of this industry that have incredible assets, but they don't have the right field. So that's why we launched in Mexico. It had a lot to do with old relationships that I had from previous companies. And they were people that I was friends with and had just been keeping in touch with, during the out years of not working with them. And earlier when I had worked with them, we had a lot of fun together. They were legitimate friends or people who we hung out with outside of, just, work events and things like that. But I got in touch with some of my neighbors, an old friend of mine, who's a neighbor. She was about 10 minutes away from me. And when we were ready to go, when David and I, came together and we said, all right, let's go. We have, the capital that we need. We've got the corporate team. We've got the product. I just got in touch with an old friend. I actually responded to a text that she had sent me several months previous. And she's like, oh, you're now getting back to me. And I said, yeah, I think we should talk. So we went and met at a small cafe near our house. A week later with two more of my neighbors who live within 10 minutes from me. And their organizations are all Latin America, mostly Mexico. And so when they decided to join us, it was kind of turnkey. It was, all right, let's fly to Mexico. Let's have a meeting with our top leaders and let's let them know what we're doing. And so that's what we did. After meeting with my friend Christina, flew to Mexico and, just started to meet with more and more people, and it just proliferated. But I would say that the primary core, sort of top 20% were people that I'd worked with before. So that's why Mexico. It's not easier in Mexico. It's definitely harder in Mexico, contrary to what a lot of people in America think. They think, supplements is easier. It's much more challenging in Mexico than in the United States. So we overcame some hurdles, but it was the right thing. And, the other thing that I'll just add, and David, you can add to this. Anybody watching this that is, running a company, you know that people don't join corporations; they join people. And they join the culture of the company, right? And the culture is really defined by, who you have at the base of your company. Mexico specifically, Latin America generally, but Mexico specifically has a really cool culture, right? A lot of traditional family values, things like that, things that really lend themselves well to the direct selling industry where they foster a strong sense of belonging. And that was sort of the influence that we wanted on the foundation of ACTIVZ, right? It's not something that you can necessarily artificially manufacture. You have to have the right people to do that. So that was a big reason why I can remember, David, meeting with you and a couple of your investors in your previous manufacturing company. And that's what we talked to them about. It was having that cultural, that influence on the culture. So everybody was really on board with that. But that's another reason why Mexico made sense.
As we were talking, all of those reasons made sense to me, but it also paralleled the desire that I had that I expressed earlier for us to do something different. I didn't want us to be viewed as simply version 2.0 of something we'd done before. We wanted to do something and break the mold. Obviously, we were aware of the tremendous success of companies like Herbalife and OmniLife in Mexico. We knew of Mexico's stature in the direct selling world as a great market. But nevertheless, all those demographics and all that economic information aside, if we'd not had those relationships, if we didn't have Ryan and others' experience, it wouldn't have made a lot of sense. But all of those things combining together made perfect sense to me. And to me and my fellow investors, we thought, yes, let's get behind this. We can really create something out of this.
I love that. There's a few things I'd love to circle back on. I totally agree with the relationships. That really is what drives so much of this channel, of this business. Again, not just on the field side, but on the corporate side as well. And Ryan, you brought up culture, which I think is so important. It gets discussed all the time, maybe even ad nauseum, but it still is one of the most foundational and important aspects. And I think that as direct selling and the landscape continues to evolve, culture is one of the things that we can do to really differentiate, to target different audiences, different consumer sets. And I think culture is becoming increasingly more important. We've always known it's vital, but it's become increasingly important here in the direct selling landscape. And David, you talked about the importance of differentiation, and that is so key and important in developing any launch strategy. That you said that success today is really about doing something different. So it's not always about having the better product, the better widget. Again, our products are great. The products are amazing, but even just taking a little bit of a different tact on something can mean all the difference in the success of a company, especially of a startup. So I love that you focused on there kind of doing something different. I'm curious, you mentioned some of the challenges of international. Did you know some of these challenges? Like, were you aware of some of these, potential speed bumps that you were going to hit taking an international first approach, or these things that over time you ended up kind of bumping into as you grew and progressed?
Well, I knew about some of the challenges theoretically and some practically. In previous companies, we'd gone to Japan, for example. We'd gone to Mexico. We'd gone to some other countries. I don't think that I understood nearly as much as Ryan, because he had a much deeper experience set. But there are things that theoretically you say, okay, I understand we need to do registration in these countries, pre-market registration, unlike what we do here in the United States. I assumed that for the most part, it would be that some of these bureaucracies that you have to deal with in any country would operate a lot like our bureaucracies do. They don't. There's a lot of things that are quite different. And for me, that's more of a novice in dealing with the Latin world. There were some head-scratching things that Ryan, in turn, just kind of took in stride because he had experience. If it just been me on my own, I would have been beating my head against the wall, saying, "What are we doing? This is never going to work." But fortunately, we had jumped through those hoops before, either as a team or separately with the very, we have over 100 years of successful direct selling experience on our management team across a wide spectrum of companies and geographic locations. And so I think one of our strengths basically is being able to utilize that experience set to overcome some of these inevitable challenges that arise.
I love that. You both mentioned the importance of product and finding the right product, and also the importance of this product market fit. So I'm curious, knowing that you were going international first, knowing that you were, starting with international registration, that you were going to be then extending these products into multiple markets, did that inform the product that you ended up landing on, how you priced it? I'm curious how kind of finding that product market fit with the international first approach really informed your product strategy.
The product didn't really inform our international strategy, with the exception of one way. We knew that there would be demand for it. I mean, it was a product developed by some scientists who already had notoriety, with at least with the people that I knew. And so we believe that, okay, other people are also going to get on board. They're going to love to learn about epigenetics. For example, epigenetics is not something that you hear about, walking through the streets of Mexico. And frankly, you don't hear much about it here in the United States either. So, I mean, to the extent that it was novel, it informed our strategy. David talked about some of the hurdles that we hit. I'll say this. It was what you don't anticipate is and expect is that it's easier to launch a nutritional supplement in the United States than it is almost anywhere else in the world, including Mexico, and especially Mexico. First of all, finding out how they were going to allow us to register it. Is it a nutritional supplement? Is it a food? Is it an herbal remedy? Is it herbal medicine? I mean, these are all actual legal classifications for products. Is it a pharmaceutical? And so once they determine what you can register it, then you need to jump through those hoops. So I would say that our internet, I'm not going to call it expansion, but just launching in Mexico first and then expanding throughout Latin America, it informed us to the extent where we are much more, we use a little bit more discretion today when we evaluate new product launches, new line expansions, as to whether or not can we even get this in this market, or how difficult is it going to be? Because I think that we've done, in terms of the amount of work we've put into this, we could have launched probably 20 products in the United States, in getting our handful of products into Latin America. So it informs us a lot more today than it did when we launched, but we just knew that we wanted to get what we call the trifecta, which is our big three into the marketplace. So we sunk a lot of resources and a lot of time into doing that. And I would say that it wasn't so much a pull, a pull marketing strategy where we went there because in Mexico they like this kind of product. It was more about, we have one of a kind science that no one else is talking about. We have to pay the price to get it into the marketplace, and it will be worth it. And so far it has been.
That's really interesting. It definitely, having that international perspective as you do product development, in some ways, again, when you're comparing it to the US, it does look like a longer development process, a longer roadmap. But in the long run, knowing that you want it to go international, formulating it accordingly, in the long run ends up usually saving a little bit of time, but a lot of hassle on the upfront. David, I'm curious about, shifting from product into the comp plan. How did this international first and Mexico first approach help you determine what the compensation structure of the comp plan was like?
Well, I mentioned early on that because of my background as a lawyer and then a businessman in retail, it wasn't like I was thoroughly steeped in comp plan experience before I met Ryan. And I tried to educate myself on the various different kinds of comp plans and companies that had this kind and that kind, but that was still very, very kind of surface oriented. My understanding wasn't deep at all. When I first met Ryan and he walked me through the rationale behind the comp plan that we had at our earlier company, what we were trying to accomplish, what we were trying to help, I'll just tell you, to have it be fair is ultimately the fundamental pillar that we strive for. And fair to everyone, but probably if it's slanted at all, to be slanted more towards the little guy and towards the masses, as opposed to just a few at the top. And when he would tell me these things, all of that resonated very strongly with me, because that's just fundamentally the way that I think. And so I think that my partner, Ryan, is, I'm probably going to embarrass him, but I tell him this and others all the time, I think he is the preeminent authority on comp plans, period. Now, some people might say, well, how many people do you know? Well, I've met quite a few now in the 15 years that I've been in this industry, and a lot of people who give me their ideas, and none of them are as well reasoned to me as my partner, Ryan. And we wanted it to be fair. We wanted it to be exciting and stimulating. Obviously, you have to, to the extent that you don't talk about your compensation and your business plan or your business opportunity as a product, you're failing, because at the end of the day, we're not after just customers, although we want those as well. We want business builders. We, just like if I was in the retail sector, I wouldn't spend all the time talking about the benefits. I would be talking to Walmart and Target about the money they're going to make on my product, as I put it there. And that's fundamentally why they do it. They don't take it in because the product's so great. They take it in because they're going to make a lot of money. And so from that standpoint, channels are not that different. And going out with something that was going to be attractive and fair, and something that we could maintain, and we wouldn't have to change mid-course because now it didn't make sense for the company. Those were all very important elements for us. Ryan, you can probably elaborate on that a little more.
I will add by saying, what you started with is important. David and I are very much 100% on the same page as far as our philosophy for what a comp plan is supposed to do. And Wayne, you interview a lot of people, right? A lot of people running companies. Their philosophies are kind of across the board. And I've met with and worked with many, many, many people over the years. Some people, some distributors and corporate people, they think, hey, this is going to be a trickle down plan. This is going to be, we're going to budget the majority of our payout to the highest rank or the highest ranks, and there's trickle down. That's going to motivate everyone to run, that was really popular in the 80s and the 90s. Then the early 2000s, they started to shift a little away, but those comp plans kind of create a churn and burn, a revolving door at the bottom of your company where people just come in and out. They can't make money. So when David and I did get together, what we talked about wasn't the nuts and bolts of the plan. It was the philosophy of the plan. It was, how do we want to be known? How do we want people to characterize us? What types of people do we want to attract? Do we want to attract people who are looking for a quick buck? And I don't mean this to be a pejorative anyway or to put anybody down, but there's certain types of comp plans, binaries. They attract a certain type of person. They just do. Get in now, right? Get in now. Without the, hey, this is a work program. It's going to take some real investment and time to build. And we didn't really want people that would just churn and burn, that would get in quick, make a quick buck and leave. We really wanted to create something that someone could build for 3 to 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, 8 years, and then have a real nice residual asset, right? And then when David talks about the middle class, building a healthy middle class, focusing on having as big a middle class as possible, we agreed on that philosophically because, we don't want to insult anyone's intelligence. We don't want to say, hey, get in, you're going to get rich. That typifies why I have a love-hate relationship with this industry and always have had since you and I knew each other in the early 90s. I've not always been bullish on the direct selling industry, but I am bullish on it when done right. And when by analyzing someone's comp plan, whether or not they're doing it right. If they're trying to hide money from their distributors, reducing volume, commissionable payout, yet touting a 70% payout. There's all these games. And David and I said, we don't want to play any games. We want to be as simple as possible and as fair as possible, just like David said, and really build a healthy middle class so that we can increase retention, have a high percentage retention, which will pay the leaders, right? No leader wants to start over, right? Because the company has poor retention. Leaders want to retire, right? They want to sail off into the sunset. I get that. That's something that we absolutely understand. While at the same time, it's got to be rewarding to, I don't say just the little guy per se, because it's also not a bottom-up approach to the comp plan. Some comp plans are where you can make, $2,000, by hitting the second rank, but you won't ever go beyond that. And those companies don't last either. So it's a balanced plan, like David said. We have a healthy middle class. And I've never worked in a company in, almost 3 decades. Wayne, I'm saying that because you can tout the same number as I can, where we just hear constantly. I still get messages where in our 7th year now, people are constantly thanking us for our comp plan. I don't remember ever having that happen at any companies, other than just the top distributors. But the masses contact us. And I'll tell you what, we have thousands of people all over Latin America, and now in the U.S., also our second biggest market. They're living off of what they make, with ACTIVZ. So that's kind of proof that the pudding is good.
DSN's 20th anniversary event is next week, and there's still time to register for free and join more than 600 of your executive peers at the channel's premier executive event of the year. Be part of the live event experience as we break records, raise the bar, and set a new standard for what a direct selling education and recognition event can and should be. Our registration numbers are shattering past events, and we want you there for this epic gathering. We hope to see you Tuesday, April 2nd through Thursday, April 4th at the Irving Convention Center in Irving, Texas. 70 plus attendees for the invitation-only CEO Forum, more than ever before. Record attendance for the AI Workshop and AI Roundtable sessions taking place on Tuesday, April 2nd. 40 plus speakers delivering 16 hours of DSU content. 50 billion of revenue represented on stage over 2 days. Multiple networking opportunities Tuesday evening and throughout the day on Wednesday and Thursday. record attendance at the Global Celebration event with live music from the Free Radicals band during and after, and 16 Bravo Awards and the annual Global 100 list will be revealed Wednesday evening at the celebration event. 20 world-class supplier partners and supplier sponsors, and 60 plus generous DSN supporter companies that help make these events happen and possible and free for direct selling executives. Register for free today at dsnevents.com. We hope to see you there Tuesday, April 2nd for the welcome reception and AI sessions from 5 to 8 p.m. Complimentary access to all 3 events on Tuesday is included with your DSU registration. And if you're already registered, we are so excited and cannot wait to see you. Please check your inbox for more details about the event. We look forward to seeing everyone next week in Irving, Texas.
David, you talked about really helping to kind of establish that philosophy and structure around the comp plan early on. And I think it is important to say, look, these are the people that we are essentially going to target, going to overserve. We might have secondary, even tertiary, customers, I'll say, or stakeholders there that benefit in some way. But let's establish a center of gravity, on the earlier side, the earlier end of the comp plan, on the latter end of the comp plan. I think that is so important. And without kind of putting those stakes in the ground, it becomes really challenging downstream to make adjustments. So if you establish your comp plan philosophy and structure one way, and then 2 years later say, oh, we're all about the customer. Let's all focus 100% on the customer. Well, your hands or a hand may be tied a little bit behind your back in the ability to really enact that strategy. And so I'm really impressed that you were so thoughtful about this comp plan, how to establish it, both the positive and negative long-term ramifications for what it is, but it really is a signal for who we are providing value to. Who are we targeting? Who do we want to overserve and provide that value to? I think there's so much in what you just said there. You also mentioned further expansion. So I'd love to kind of get into this international rollout strategy. And you moved from Mexico into other Latin American markets. Can you talk about some of those things that, you did establish, those philosophies around that kind of, I know, Ryan, you talk about kind of a cultural base of the company. Can you talk about the importance of that as you continued your expansion into other markets?
Well, going back to your comment on our cultural base, it has been, we have had to be and on a regular basis have to go back to our touch points, because again, anybody watching this who is working in a company, that you can lose your culture, right? Cultures are lost in any organization, whether it's a company or an organization, a church, anything. Culture can change, and so you have to be very intentional about guarding it, right, and protecting it. And as you expand into other markets, we have had the experience where we have, I'm not sure how else to say it other than different demographics of people join us, and that's to be expected. That's always going to happen. You're not just going to have the same small fan club that you started your company with. And everybody should understand that things will change, but what won't change is who we are, right? And our basic cultural values. And that is easier said than done. Right. We've had to, we've come out with ACTIVZ code of ethics, for our leaders to talk about, look, here's what we find acceptable. Here's not acceptable. These aren't policies. These are just more ethics, touch points around ethics. Do we want people to come in here and say, hey, I'm the best team and you guys all suck? And, some things are acceptable in other companies. And David and I were like, we don't want certain types of people in our company, and we don't want certain types of behaviors in our company. Right. Because again, anybody watching this will agree with me. You have an element in your company that you kind of don't really love, right? So expanding internationally, we've had to kind of really hold tight to those that cultural foundation. An old mentor of mine and someone who and I'll give him credit for this, Brett Nelson, back when we were launching PharmaNex, you'll remember this, Wayne. I can remember sitting around a boardroom with an advisory board, a newly assembled advisory board of distributors, right, who were, mostly the top earners from Nu Skin. And they were arguing about, you can't tell us this, and you can't, tell us that we have to be this way or that way. We can't do this. And I can remember he coined something that I've used my entire career. He said, look, we're not here to legislate morality, but every one of you has a responsibility to shape culture and to shape our culture. And so that's been our attitude. That's our attitude here, right? We're ultimately the arbiters of that culture, but our top leaders that come in, our management team, they understand who we are, what things are acceptable, what's not acceptable. And I'm talking a lot more about that than I am about international expansion. But honestly, that has been sort of the foundation as we go into new countries, whether it's Bolivia or Colombia or Ecuador or Costa Rica or Guatemala or the United States, wherever we are, in earnest going into, you have people, hitch their wagon to your company, to our company, who want to do things differently. And we have to kind of course correct. Okay, you did that at that company. Here, we're going to do things a little bit different. We're going to ask that you not disparage. We're going to ask that you not self-promote. We're going to ask that you not do those things. So it's been sort of a guidepost for us as we've entered other markets. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question very well.
You are, yeah. Establishing those values early on, again, it's going to inform how you approach any issue, any decision that you make. So absolutely, you're answering it really well.
On that note, our international expansion has spread organically in the sense that people have something that they want to share with their friends wherever they happen to live. And so we have not gone out and bought leaders. We haven't focused on a particular country and said, we want to be here, so can we find some leaders that we can buy to join our company? We just haven't done that. And in fact, we won't do that. That's not our philosophy. And so if it's all based upon, if your expansion, either within a country or outside of a country, is based upon people's excitement about sharing something, whether that's the products, the comp plan, or the culture of the company. And often, as you know, it's all kind of wrapped up in one. We want them to be excited about sharing the Active story. And that really does start, I think, with how they fundamentally feel about the company. And we talk all the time internally about there's two major qualifications that somebody has to have to work with us on the corporate team, all summarized by the word good. They have to be good, meaning they have to be good at what they do, and they have to be good people. If they're only good in one of those areas, we won't hire them. If they're good at what they do, but they're not good people, they won't get hired. If they're not good at what they do and they're good people, we'll be friends, but they still won't get hired. They've got to have both of those combinations, because one of our touchstones is we talk about, it's not a sexy motto, and I wouldn't even say it's our company slogan, but we talk about, we'll make you better. And we want every single aspect, every single touch point, every single relationship, whether that be a distributor, a customer, a vendor, an employee, anybody who has any, even if it's just a tangential contact with our company, to feel like, oh, that was great. Those guys, for whatever period of time I was there, however long of a duration my contact with them was, I feel like I learned something, I gained something happened. And that's really that culture. And Ryan talked about it at the very beginning. People talk about family all the time. And family within the Latin community remains very strong, and the extended family. Now that comes with everything that a family comes with, dysfunction, arguments, quarrels, making up, all that kind of stuff. All of those features of family can certainly be found here at ACTIVZ. But I think when there's that fundamental grounding, that foundation of trust, and of striving. Now, we make mistakes, and sometimes we're misconstrued, and things that we thought were good, people are like, whoa, what's that all about? And we end up having to explain ourselves. We have to apologize. We do lots of things, but we really do try to hold the line at being good, being fair, acting with integrity, and doing the things that are going to benefit everyone, and not just acting out of expediency.
I love those. Such amazing, simple yet powerful filters for decision-making, for cultural establishment. I love that. That's really important. David, I'm also curious. So moving from Mexico into other Latin American markets. So there's obviously a language similarity for maybe all but one or two of those markets. But each is so unique in so many ways. And I'm curious how, when you had one market that you were completely focused on, and then you started to expand through Latin America. How did you handle each of those unique markets and make sure they felt that they also had, the attention and the focus that they needed from corporate there?
Well, actually, I think we came to the United States before we expanded.
Oh, okay.
Might have been pretty close to Peru, frankly, but that again happened organically with it spreading over with people that our Mexican distributors knew in the United States, friends, family members, that they wanted to share the same opportunity that they were experiencing there. But your question remains a valid one. And I would be lying if every single distributor that you ever talked to said, "Oh yeah, they give equal, access, equal emphasis to every single market." It's not true. And of course, companies can't do that regardless of channel. You focus on the largest providers, the largest segments that are providing revenue to your company. What's interesting is that by going to Mexico first, I think that distributors who have had experiences with other companies have really felt like the redheaded stepchild because companies didn't go there first. They were viewed as a secondary or tertiary market and didn't get the support. So that when they are now focused upon and given priority, they're like, "Whoa, we've never had this before. This is amazing." And by us seeing that and recognizing that experience, that does underscore to us what we already knew intellectually, but we kind of had to make sure that we internalize, is that everyone wants to feel special. Everyone wants to feel like their needs and desires are being heard. And so while we don't do it perfectly, and as we've grown, we now have more resources, human resources, financial resources. But what we do, I think a pretty good job of, is making sure that, number one, we're going to listen to you. Number two, we're consistent in our message, that we're going to provide the basics of what you need. No one is going to be able to say, I don't think, and maybe Ryan can correct me on this, is that ACTIVZ did not fulfill their side of the bargain when they said, this would be a great opportunity for me. These products will work. They're going to be registered. The government's going to recognize them properly. All of those things that I need to build my business, they are going to provide. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that we'll have as many in-person events in a smaller country as a larger country, but we will provide what you need to build a business and keep our part of the bargain, regardless of where you are.
Oh, that's great. I love that. And I want to highlight that you talked about some of this expansion, I'm sure, was on the roadmap, and other markets happened more organically. And even in there, though, you still have to have a strategy for how do you support and scale with this organic growth. Again, 50 million Spanish speakers in the United States, an incredible market, a really logical kind of, organic extension of the business there from Mexico. And I know that also you've expanded into Asia, kind of turned your sights there as well. I'm curious, did this happen organically also? Was this always part of the roadmap, knowing that, Asia has a really strong history in direct selling? Ryan, can you talk a little bit about that expansion process?
Sure. I'm going to take a half a step backwards and just say that early on, we were scratching our heads on, because we had demand for our products in lots of countries and for the business in lots of countries where we weren't registered. And so we spent quite a bit of time developing a program that there are versions of this in other companies that I've been at, but nothing quite like what we wanted. We call it Global Connect. And what we ended up doing is we partnered with large drop shippers, freight forwarders. They ship to 170 countries, 220 territories all over the world. And we developed sort of a payment platform that allows us to pay anybody anywhere on a virtual card. They can transfer it to their local bank account, things like that, make payments with it. And people can buy for personal use only product, right? So technically it doesn't have to be registered if it's, someone just saying, hey, I'm not going to commercialize this. I'm not going to sell it. I'm just going to use it, kind of like someone would buy, vitamins from off of Amazon when they live in Singapore or Peru or something like that. So that has allowed us to get this program, Global Connect, has allowed us to get a foothold in lots of countries that we otherwise would not have a foothold in, right? And we are growing. I mean, we have people who are annualized making over $100,000 a year in markets that aren't even open right now. And, they are on auto ship. They get the product every month. In some cases, they pay a little bit more on shipping, but entrepreneurs can still build a business with that. And there's a lot. So that's really the strategy that we utilized to expand globally. Your question is around Asia, and really Asia evolved organically in the same way that Latin America evolved organically. It was based on pre-existing relationships that we had there. And, we were in an NFR, not for resale status in Japan, which is essentially the same status in all of these, I'll call global connect markets, right? Countries where we're not currently open, where people can order the product for personal use only. We can pay commissions, and so it's allowed us to operate. So, everything has really been organic. We haven't really pushed our way into any country, really. I mean, starting with our first one, starting with Mexico, and that seems to be the best strategy. I will just say the last thing I want to say about that, Wayne, is I have been at companies, David, at the same companies as David has, where there are always members of the executive management team or board of directors who will say to themselves or ask rhetorically or not rhetorically, hey, why don't we go to that country, or this state has, 50 million people living in it. In this country, how come we're operating in, little old, Bolivia with 12 million people, or Colombia with 50 million people, or Peru with 30 million people, or why launching in Mexico with 120 million when we could be in this $340 million country? And what they don't get about this industry is the companies that do that say, okay, let's start doing PR campaigns or running. You're going to attract the wrong people, right? You got to go where you have relationships, where you trust people and they trust you. If you go and try and sell yourself in a market where you're not wanted, where you don't have people, you're going to get people who come in and, people are for sale, right? And David said something really important a few minutes ago. One of our sort of hallmark philosophies is we don't buy people at all, right? They look at the comp plan and we say, look, you compare this toe to toe with any comp plan in our products, with any products on the market, and then you choose for yourself. But we're not gonna pay you under the table to join us. And that same philosophy is our sort of the guiding principle for how we open new countries. We don't do that with new countries either, right? We're pulled into those markets, and that's the only thing that works, frankly.
Yeah, I'll take organic growth any day of the week. A demand-driven market launch is always going to be more successful. I think that it's definitely a winning strategy. But again, to your leadership style, to all of the credit of your company being able to scale with that demand, to follow the demand, to be able to be agile, to move, to scale, to grow, is really 90% of, I think, the success. It's great if there's demand, but not being able to fulfill and deliver on that, then, why even be in business? So I want to also talk with this international first approach, how it impacted your decision-making and choices around technology. So obviously different platforms, different markets, different technologies and tools get used. David, can you share a little bit about how you approach technology with this international first approach?
Sure. Well, I think I speak for Ryan as well, that I wouldn't say that we went in to the launch and going to Mexico with the idea that in order to do so, we need a specific or unusual type of technology. We use the same back office, commission engines as other companies, and we were doing things with apps and things like that weren't really that unusual. I think the biggest technological breakthrough, for want of a better word, was kind of thrust upon us because of COVID. And that's where we weren't able to travel. They weren't able to have meetings like they were used to. And so everyone was relegated to using their phones or their laptop via Zoom or some other platform to communicate. And I think it's a huge credit, not only to members of our team, but to leaders to train people and get accustomed to something that was very foreign. That whole thing, as we all remember, was just weird. Okay, but it showed that people are resilient and are adaptable, and people embrace that in ways that, frankly, I was surprised at, and I was actually surprised that some markets embraced it better than others. For example, We talked about Asia. One of the reasons for our presence in Japan is I speak Japanese, and previous companies we had great success with Japan. And we thought the Japanese, they kind of have this stereotypical reputation of being great with technology. Well, you know what? They don't like Zoom. They don't like to do Zoom meetings. They just don't like it. It's not that they can't do it. They just don't want to do it. Whereas in Peru or Mexico or these other markets, people were just jumping on board and doing what they had to do because they had this driving desire to build their companies. We were able to leverage relationships with television stations that allowed us to use their studios as broadcast hubs, so that because we couldn't do large in-person events, we utilized their facilities to have international broadcasts that everyone could join and have a quality that really belied our size at the time. And so embracing those type of things has really helped us and contributed to our growth. And then I think that some of the things that we've kind of gone back to old school on, and that is in terms of just saying, what is it that really motivates people? If we can deliver that through technology, great. But if it takes just figuring out what are the, I don't want to say buttons, that sounds manipulative, but what really is important to people, what's going to get them off the couch and doing something, that's where I think that we've been pretty nimble and trying things out, sometimes with the aid of technology, sometimes not, just trying new programs and seeing how they work.
Yeah, I love that. Ryan, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to add something. David, you're walking down memory lane here a little bit when you talk about, the COVID years, the forced closures and all of that forced us to think outside the box. And another often overlooked aspect of technology, we talk about technology, we think about marketing, right? How do you market? How do distributors market? Technology isn't just, for marketing. When you talk about international, other markets outside the United States, you've got to look at, well, how do they pay for product, right? How do we pay them? And so we really had to stretch ourselves. And I give credit to our operations team for this. In really diving in and assimilating to the country, right? You cannot force a square peg into a round hole. I learned that many years ago at other companies that failed miserably trying to make the world roam, as it were, and it just doesn't work. And so Mexico is a good example of this. How do people pay for products? Well, we had to stand up, their platform which allowed people to pay in cash at OXXO, at 7-Eleven. Throughout Peru and little retail establishments. The use of credit cards is not the same as the United States in some of these markets, as we all know. And so you got to meet the people where they're at. And that adage of meeting people where they're at isn't just a nice sounding platitude. It literally means you find out how they live, how they operate, what they can and can't do, and then you do that. Right. And if you're unable to do that, you won't succeed in that market. So, David will remember as well. Remember this vividly, that, we had to, when during COVID, in some markets they were closing freeways. So we scrambled and we stood up pickup centers all over the country. And we got, we quickly educated people in those different areas on how to use simple technology to fulfill orders for us. So we had to put preempt and then preempt closures in other markets. We were lucky to accomplish this. I'm going to use the word luck. It had to do with a lot of hard work on behalf of our operations team to quickly set up pickup centers, to quickly stand up other payment platforms that allowed people to go pay across the street at 7-Eleven for their product. And that accounts for still to this day a significant amount of our revenue. So, using technology to diversify not just how people market, but how they pay for product, how they get their product, that's been a really important role that technology has played in our history. And I think more than our ability to market. And then, of course, David hit on the head. Zoom really was a game changer for us.
Well, one more thing, it's kind of funny as you look back on it now because it seems so fundamental, but I'm sure every company and everybody listening to this when people sign up, they put their emails in, right? Well, we found out very quickly that even though everybody has an email, not everybody looks at them. And so in Mexico, they prefer WhatsApp to almost anything else. In Japan, they prefer Line. In Taiwan, it's WeChat. And you have to figure out which communication channel. And in the US, we find that Telegram is one of the better ones for us to use for whatever reason, along with WhatsApp. So all of these things are things that we've learned along the way. We've stubbed our toes, certainly. But I do think that one thing that Ryan mentioned, two things really. One, the idea of being nimble. And number two, meeting people where they're at. That is really something that is another real deeply entrenched philosophy of ours, because we know that one size definitely does not fit all.
Absolutely. Those are two, I think, of the primary reasons. It seems to me as kind of an outside observer of how ACTIVZ has been able to have such consistent growth, has been able to keep up with the complexity, to keep up with the scale. Again, you talk about being nimble. I love the story that Ryan told about, setting up pickup centers all over the place, just doing everything you can to make business happen. That is definitely a part of it. And I also want to get into this second aspect of meeting people where they're at. And David, this is one of the things that really stood out the most to me in your most recent DSU speech. I took some notes on that and have gone back to it a few times. This idea, again, doesn't just apply to the geographies, to the technology, but really how we shop, where we buy, the channel strategy that you have, the marketing strategy. Can you talk a little bit about this concept and philosophy of meeting people where they're at and how it's really developed your omni-channel strategy?
Well, I think that it really affects basically everything we're all about. For example, we talked earlier about the compensation plan. There are some people that really do want to replace their income from their job entirely, and so that's where they're at. There are some people who don't, and they'll be happy with $500 a month. So we want to meet them where they're at. So the compensation plan was designed with meeting people where they're at. Even our product development we want something that people need universally, that they all, regardless of where you're at in life, you're going to benefit from these products. And then the next thing that you mentioned, what we call our omni-channel approach. We know that some people, you could beat them over the head with the science. And we've got a lot of science. People sometimes, kind of criticize us saying, you guys are way too much steak and not enough sizzle. Well, that's okay. We're fine with having lots of steak. I mean, we probably need a little bit more sizzle maybe, but we have a plethora of not borrowed science, but primary science, patents and research studies and published studies on our products. And we know that there are people you could hit over the head with that, and it doesn't matter. That once they hear the word direct selling or network marketing, they're going to cross their arms, fold their legs, and say, no way. That's all snake oil, and that's all a pyramid scheme and everything like that. But those same people, if they see something on Amazon or someplace else, they're going to say, oh, it must be great. Amazon must have vetted all these products, and these things are all wonderful and all that kind of stuff. They do no research. Well, guess what? We want those people to benefit from our products as well. And so we said, how do we approach those people who are going to run away if they get a whiff of anything that seems to pertain to direct selling? And so we said, let's meet them where they're at, and we'll see how can we present it to them. And then by the same token, we don't want to be in competition with our distributors. We don't even want to have even the suggestion that we're in competition with our distributors. So we say, okay, this is our contribution. We'll take that revenue that we make off of Amazon or these other channels, and we're going to put it into the pool. And as you attain certain ranks, you'll be able to participate in those pools. And by the way, other things that we do to along the lines of social media and others, we'll develop leads that we will share with you so that you can build your organizations along the way also. And so that's, I think, a hallmark. And frankly, again, I'll give full credit for that idea of this omni-channel approach. To Ryan, I philosophically have always felt that we should meet people where they are and knew about the stereotypes in regards to this industry, but I hadn't really conceptualized it in terms of the phrase omni-channel. And my partner had clear ideas about that, and as usual, we were on the same wavelength there, and that's really what was the genesis for that approach.
Yeah, I think ACTIVZ has done an incredible job of really creating awareness, acquiring these customers and distributors, but doing it in a way that completely protects the distributor's business and avoids any potential channel conflict. I think you've done it in a really smart and strategic way. And I think a lot of us can look to that and learn from that. With omni-channel selling also comes more of an omni-channel marketing approach. And I'm curious, Ryan, how has this changed kind of some of the marketing at a tactical level? And what I mean by that is in direct selling, we're used to kind of marketing in a certain way. It's less kind of going right out to the customer and trying to do any customer acquisition. Has part of the marketing strategy been to get more into the acquisition business? And if so, did you have to bring in that skill set? Because again, there's not a lot of muscle memory here in the direct selling channel for that.
Yeah, that's a great question. And, the truth is it's evolving, it's constantly evolving. And I think our best omni-channel marketing efforts are yet to come. When we were, I think before we launched the company, David, we were meeting with, producers from Hollywood who had been the same producers who did large, very successful reality TV shows that everybody watching this would be familiar with. And, we were working on omni-channel strategies. We'll call it a marketing strategy. With them, and we've I guess just to kind of finish that thought, we were developing something where the protagonist of this reality show was going to actually be a distributor of ACTIVZ, and people would see the products and be able to buy things they see in the show through an independent site. But what David said also is the most important part of the equation is that the commissionable value of the product would go into this revenue share pool, which we do pay out every single month to not just our top level ranks, our low level and above ranks. So everyone can have a chip in the big game with that omni-channel pool. So that's the type of thing we're developing. That didn't come to fruition. It's Hollywood and shows get cut, before they ever even see the light of day sometimes. But that, some of the strategy includes kiosks, direct to consumer marketing. We've had professional athletes endorse us on their own, back to the, who are we paying to do this? We don't buy them. They're all people who use our products. We've had professional boxers, soccer players in Mexico, Mama Coco from the Disney, from the renowned movie Coco, the actual woman. She was one of our customers, and so we've had some organic marketing campaigns that we've engaged in that have driven the omni-channel aspect of this company, of our business. When I say it's under development, it means that most of our focus has been out of necessity with our distributors. But they are all excited. They're always excited whenever they see some of these campaigns run, which are directed to consumers. I will say this, back to the discussion on technology. We launched our company generating hundreds and hundreds, thousands of leads for our distributors. We have a contracted agency that we work with down in Mexico. They're probably the best at lead gen and at targeting demographics in whatever country you want with whatever profile. And that was a real stroke of luck for us as we launched the company. We continue to do that. And so what the agency does is it's a lot of omni-channel marketing, right? And we bring in, we throw out a massive net into the ocean of potential consumers, and we pull them all in. And, we bifurcate. There's customers, people only interested in the product. There's people interested in knowing more about how to own and operate an independent distribution franchise. We assign them out to our distributors, or the sales directly go in and fund this omni-channel bonus. And for anyone critical that might be watching this saying, you guys don't get the industry. You are competing with your distributors. Or we're not. There's an omni-channel price. The omni-channel price is significantly higher than our retail price, and then the distributor price and the PC price, preferred customer price. So our distributors love having a chip in the big game, knowing that you can be a mid-level rank living in Winnemucca, Nevada. Don't want to offend anyone from Winnemucca, Nevada. It's a small town. And, have a $10,000 of volume from your team who lives in Winnemucca. Well, when you access this omni-channel global bonus pool, right, you have a chip, to repeat myself, in the big game, sales transacting from Amazon, sales transacting potentially from kiosks that we're going to go into in unopened markets. We've had large transactions take place in countries that we will never do business in. All of that funds this omni-channel pool that David talked about. So our marketing has been social media, but we're looking at, a variety of things.
Yeah, no, you actually really are. And I just, again, want to highlight, I think that pricing differential has been so important in protecting the distributor's business. And by doing that, then them giving the company the permission to go out and kind of market in these new ways that you mentioned. And I think it's really cool that you look to all these really unique ways to advertise, to create awareness, to create demand. And I know we're going to be seeing really more and more of that over the years. And that kind of brings me to another thing that I've heard David speak about is kind of having this willingness and propensity to try new things. And I'm curious, David, how have you been able to kind of institutionalize or operationalize that practice of trying new things, of getting permission to do these little tests, without maybe, someone at different ranks in the organization getting their hand slapped for trying something that didn't work? Can you talk about how you've been able to bring that into the culture of the company?
Sure. I think that it comes fundamentally by recognizing that not all good ideas come from the same place. And neither Ryan nor I feel like, despite our titles as co-founders and co-CEOs, that we are the reservoir of all knowledge and intelligence. That there are really good ideas that come from other places. Ryan's had some wonderful ideas based upon his experience and knowledge as to things that we've done. And yet some of our better ideas in terms of what we want to try, particularly on the social media side, have come from distributors. Distributors, for example, who have been very successful in TikTok. And I'm too old to be successful in TikTok, okay? And more than that, I'm too old to want to be successful in TikTok. But nevertheless, we have this culture of sharing so that these individuals who have been successful, they've trained other people who aren't even in their organization and say, if you want to be successful, we'll help you be successful. And so we've certainly tried some things, certain Facebook strategies that were not as successful as others. There were other types of things that we've tried on a trial basis that didn't work that well. You kind of mentioned it. We are kind of given the luxury and the permission by our distributors to try certain things, knowing that they're involved in the game. We didn't hide the omni-channel aspect from them. We don't hide anything from them. And they are I think they feel like they are partners in this whole quest to build a wonderful, sustainable company that will change the lives of many people. And when you have that kind of dispensation from them, even if things don't work out that great, they have the grace to say, okay, well, I didn't try. Let's go on to the next thing, because they're going to listen to our ideas. And one thing that they know that we take very seriously is, as a company, providing what I call cover. We all know how difficult it is for people to go out and share a, quote, business opportunity with somebody else. Every year, there are surveys as to what people fear the most. And usually either right behind or right ahead of death is public speaking. And so that's what we ask people to do. We ask them to go out and put their reputations on the line, talking about something that by its very nature is going to be polarizing to people, and it's scary. And so we have to provide them with as much cover in the form of science, in the form of people who are well known and are on their side, who are endorsing it, with opportunities, proven opportunities to succeed and to have fun along the way, and feel like they are part of a group, a collective that will take and listen to their ideas and help move the entire ship forward. I'm not sure how many mixed metaphors I created right there in that sentence.
No, I love it.
You see what I'm trying to do is that we feel like Ryan said, everybody's got a chip in the game, and that allows us to try things, realizing that we're all in it together.
I love that. And I just wrote this down. I love the kind of analogy of providing cover or support to really protect them. And again, not only is that going to benefit, it is kind of this virtuous cycle that supporting them is going to drive the business. them giving you the permission to go out and try these new things on their behalf is going to help grow the business as well. So I'm getting down to the last couple of questions. So again, I appreciate so much both of your time and what you've been able to carve out from your business day here. You've been very generous with your time. I'm curious, and this question is going to be to each of you, as you look back over the last several years since founding, what have been one or two of the most important learnings for you as a leader and also drivers of growth? I'll start with Ryan, since we just spoke with David.
Okay. You're not giving me any time to think about that, but I'll just shoot from the hip. Most important learning experiences. I'm going to just go back with it. For me, it was returning to the basics. It really had to do with things that I already knew, that sometimes we like to think, well, maybe we should be doing something different. Maybe the industry is evolving so much that it's not what it used to be. But really, nothing's changed. It still is about relationships. So the most important learning experience for me, and frankly, driver of growth, has been to build strong relationships. And I say that remembering some difficult moments we had early on, having to overcome unanticipated challenges that, were just, you wake up one morning and there's this big, giant challenge staring you right in the face. And if not for deep relationships of trust and friendship with our field, with the distributors, we would have been buried, right? We would not have made it. And those relationships, that stickiness that exists and that existed then, it got us through everything. I mean, I can't underscore how important that is. That for me, even though it's basic and everyone knows that in air quotes, that will get you through the toughest of times, right? When you have the trust of the people who are your constituency, right? The distributors, your employees. And then as far as growth, you hold on long enough to that and you continue to build those relationships and sit in people's kitchens and living rooms and, drive from Juarez, Mexico to Chihuahua, enough time, or Cuauhtemoc, Chihuahua, enough times with those people, they'll never leave you, right? And they will allow the company to make it. And so, I mean, David, I've said this to David multiple times. I'm like, we're going to make it because of the relationships we have with these people, right? Come what may, we're going to make it because we have the best field. And I say that, not to sound hyperbolic. I've said that before to other companies, but at other companies, I had fun friends, I had great friends, right? But people who really have your back, that's sometimes a different quality. And that for us has been our saving grace and will continue to be our saving grace moving forward.
That's great. David.
Well, it's hard to top that. We were, as you mentioned early, we were recognized by DSN for 4 consecutive years of growth. Actually, the good news is we've grown every year that we've been in business. On the other hand, that doesn't mean that we haven't faced financial ruin at times, even if we were growing, where we wondered if our runway was going to be sufficient for the plane to really take off. And there were times when we were on vapors, really were. And yet, to what Ryan said, reminded us of the fact that when you have the right group pulling together and having, I don't want to get too wah-wah on people, but having faith and trusting each other, it's not a matter of being too big to fail, too small to fail. It's being too strong-minded and too faithful to fail. And I think that's really what set us apart at ACTIVZ. At 60 years old, you might say you can't teach an old dog new tricks, but I learned a lot of new tricks. I learned that I was reminded, I should say, as to not pigeonhole people and what I think that they can do or can't do based upon my previous experience with them. We have people on our staff that I knew in vastly different roles, vastly more junior roles at other companies. And so to think that they are now a chief operating officer or a VP of sales in Mexico when they used to be in the call center or something like that, that's a paradigm shift that you have to have so that you don't inadvertently limit people. And the same thing's true of people who are out in the field and making sure that maybe their confidence, maybe their light isn't bright enough, but that they can borrow yours for a while. because you really do see in them the ability to accomplish something that right now they're not seeing in themselves. And we have example after example, and that is one of the wonderful things about this industry, and it's not necessarily unique to ACTIVZ. I would never go back to retail. Okay, I've been to Bentonville, Arkansas so many times, and I'll tell you what, you don't hug. Okay, you don't go hug the vice president of sales at Walmart or at Costco. And in fact, coming from a legal background and a retail background, I didn't hug anybody. Nobody hugged. Okay, and I remember the first event that we were on stage, and we were recognizing leaders, and this woman was coming in for a hug, and I'm like, oh, here she comes. She's coming in for a hug, and I got to do this. I was pretty stiff about it. I'm sure I wasn't very embracing very much, but yet, now this whole idea of embracing others and accepting them on their terms and meeting them where they're at, that is something that I guess I always thought that I knew, Wayne, but in the past few years, I've learned it in a much more deeply personal way, and it has really. It's really made all the difference, and it's what keeps it fun. It's what keeps us going, even when we're tired and things aren't always going. It certainly has not been an uninterrupted flight to glory. There have been plateaus along the way, but it's also what keeps us very optimistic about the future, because we know that we have just such wonderful people who are all pulling together.
Oh, that's beautiful. Incredible ideas and thoughts to end on. Gentlemen, thank you both for all of your time today, for all of your insights. Sincerely want you to know there's so many of us watching. There's so many of us rooting for your success. Congrats on this continued success over the last several years since you started the company. Again, one thing I love about the direct selling channel is we do feel that what's good for one is good for all of us. So it's so great to see companies out there growing. So congrats on everything.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for the time.
Thank you for tuning in. Please take a minute to give a 5-star rating and review to help Direct Approach continue to provide more candid interviews and insights for corporate executives. And please register you and your team now for the Spring 20th Anniversary Celebration events taking place April 2nd through April 4th in Irving, Texas. You can register at dsnevents.com. Thank you for listening and supporting DSN and the Direct Approach podcast.